Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. I had two things on my schedule to choose from today. One was whether I wanted to come before all of you and introduce Governor Strickland, and then my other choice was to introduce Governor Kasich in front of the Federalist Society. So I think I made the right choice. I'm going to be... That's very cheap applause, well, thank you. I had some very interesting and controversial remarks. Unfortunately, there's somebody here from the Plain Dealer, so I'm going to dispose of my interesting remarks and put them away for a more private occasion. Sorry, Henry. I want to just say a few words to you before I introduce the governor. I was asked to just say a few words about what we're working on at the county level and the role that I think that attorneys are playing in buttressing our efforts to reestablish public trust and high standards in government. Our major job, our first task in taking over county government was really just to establish trust in the first place. Now, we have a whole list of things that we want to do. We have a whole list of very progressive and forward-looking goals for county government here. But it would be premature to try to do those if we didn't reestablish the trust of the people in the first place in their county government. And the way that we have tried to develop a legal team, and I'm here with Majid McCloof, who's a distinguished young member of the bar, but also is the county's first law director. The way that we're trying to do that is really providing the framework for ethical government. Let me just mention a couple things to you that we're doing with the assistance of some very public-spirited and public-minded attorneys. First of all, we now have in this county the strictest, bar none, the strictest ethical code and standards of any county in Ohio, bar none. And that was drafted by our attorneys looking at best practices, not just across Ohio, but across the entire country. Secondly, it's important not just to have a high standard, but also have the administrative willingness to enforce it. And without getting into too many specifics, I can tell you that on a daily basis, we are enforcing those rules strictly and uniformly and without regard to who people know or who they might happen to be related to, which unfortunately was the way the county used to work too frequently in the past. Secondly, we have established an expectation for ethical standards, not just for employees, but anyone that does business or seeks to do business with Cuyahoga County. So we also have the state's first mandatory ethics training, not just for employees and all employees, by the way, union, non-union, supervisors, and those that are supervised, but also mandatory training for any vendor. So we have a vendor ethics certification process that every vendor must go through. And by the way, if any of you do business with the county, and I know some of you do because some of your firms work for the county, there's going to be a mandatory ethics training in November for those that provide professional services, including legal services to the county, and that will take place in November. If you do not complete that, you will not be eligible to even solicit for a contract. So I was asked by my law director to remind you to please participate in that because we don't want to exclude you when that rule is effective come January. Also, besides having the administrative willingness to do it and establishing the strict guidelines in the first place, it's also so important, we believe, to have an independent actor that can enforce those rules. So that if someday there is a county executive that maybe doesn't feel as strongly as I do about these issues, there will still be somebody within county government who is beyond the reach of politics or political influence. So we are the first county in Ohio to have an independent inspector general. We ended up appointing actually a federal prosecutor. We physically put her office, her desk, she literally sits behind Frank Russo's old desk, which is interesting symbolism. But the important thing is she has broad investigative and independent powers to enforce that ethical code. And that's so important to set that pattern, I think, and that expectation in county government. Now that has existed before across the country, and it's existed in Ohio at the state level, but it never existed at the municipal or the county level in Ohio until now. So we're very proud that that's what we're doing. There's other ways that we're trying to enforce just an overall ethical culture. We have to create a culture of excellence and a culture of merit, and we have to show that we're serious about it. And I hope that you've been pleased with the progress that we've made in our first 9 months in office. Now, at this point in time, it's really a true privilege to introduce your keynote speaker, who I'm happy to say is a friend of mine and somebody that I have a lot of admiration for. He has a distinguished academic record with a bachelor's, master's in divinity, and PhD. He served 6 terms in Congress as a very effective and progressive member in the United States House of Representatives. He was elected governor of Ohio, as you know, in 2006. And in a very difficult political climate, sometimes his accomplishments were not fully appreciated. But as I think probably everybody in this audience knows, he did great work in expanding health care coverage, especially for children, making education funding the centerpiece of his administration, very progressive policies in the area of renewable energy. He ended up reducing the size of government, which Democrats can do, and we have done, and he did dramatically, actually, and he really put Ohio on the map in terms of being a national destination for economic development. If anybody had any doubts about what kind of a governor he was and how much he should be appreciated, his successor has eliminated those doubts on a weekly basis. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce Governor Tedster.
Thank you, Ed. The standard that you use to judge me by is not a particularly high one. It's great to be here today. I want to first of all begin by thanking you for inviting me, and thanking you for what you do. I am so glad that you exist. I think it's important to our state, to our nation, that the Constitution Society exists. And so thank you for that. It's also good to be here with some folks that I am particularly close to, who at one time worked with and for me, Allison Kolochik. It's good to see Allison again, and Mike Deemer, who I'm glad has a job. And I want to thank them for their service. Ann Hill, who was a vital part of our administration. And Misha. If you don't know Misha, you should know her. Everyone who knows Misha loves Misha. And she worked in my campaign, and it's wonderful for her to be here. And also, Yvette McGee-Brown, Judge. Yvette McGee-Brown, Justice Yvette McGee-Brown. Now, I'm told that she cannot yet campaign. I think it's January before she is able to campaign, but there is nothing in the law, as I understand it, and I'm confronted with a lot of lawyers, that prevents me from campaigning for her. And so please remember this wonderfully talented justice as we move into 2012. I had the great privilege of appointing her to the Ohio Supreme Court. She is the only one of our pedigree on that court, but for many, many reasons, too numerous for me to enumerate at this point. She is deserving of re-election, and I was happy to have her as my running mate, and I am proud that she is on the court, and I commend her to you. The Stephanie Tubbs Jones Award that I understand I may receive at some point today is especially meaningful to me because I knew and I served with Stephanie in the House of Representatives. And we miss her greatly. We miss her leadership. We miss her enthusiasm and inspiration. And her memory and her work lives on. And so thank you for considering me for this award. I want to say a word about County Executive Ed Fitzgerald. What an impressive person he is, and what great work he is doing. And I want to say a particular word of thanks to you, Ed, for standing up not just for Cuyahoga County voters, but for voters all across the state of Ohio as you took on the fight to make sure that people are not deprived of every effort we can legitimately give them to be able to participate in this democracy that we share. And thank you so very, very much. I had a chance right after I became governor to speak to the Capital University Law School graduation, and one of the things that I talked about at that time was the Bill of Rights. And the fact that I believe many countries have magnificent constitutions and some similar to ours. But I believe there's something that makes us as a nation perhaps unique among the nations of the earth, because our founders had the foresight to understand that there were some rights that were so precious that even majority opinion could not deprive us of them. And I think that is something that makes this country perhaps unique. The rights of the individuals to stand against majority opinion and to be protected in doing that. I remember when I was in the Congress, I was driving through Vinton County, the smallest county population-wise in Ohio, and there was a lighted cross on top of the courthouse, and someone objected to that and brought it to the attention of the decision makers of that county, and they decided that rather than to face legal action, they would remove the cross. And my opponent during that congressional campaign decided to go to the courthouse there in Vinton County and hold a rally around the flag rally, or around the cross rally. I'm sorry. And I was scheduled to be at that courthouse at the very same time that that rally around the cross was to take place. I drive into Vinton County and I see the crowd, and I decided to just keep going. And I thought I'll go out to the Senior Citizens Center and I'll hang out there until the rally's over, and then I'll go back. So I'm sitting there in the Senior Citizens Center, and lo and behold, the doors open, and all the ralliers that were at the courthouse have decided to convene at the Senior Citizen Center to map further strategy. And they saw me. And they said, "Congressman, we'd like for you to join our meeting." So I go into this meeting, and I'm sitting there, and I'm listening to these people talk about their right to have a cross on the courthouse. And one of them said, "We're the majority. And in this country, majority opinion rules." And after a little while, they turned to me and they said, "Congressman, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, I've been sitting here listening to you, and I have two things I'd like to say to you. Most of the time in this country, majority opinion rules, but not always. Because of the Bill of Rights, we as individuals have a right to express ourselves regardless of what the majority opinion may be. And then I said something else that I thought was relevant. I said, because many of the people there were ministers. And I said, you know, I've been thinking as I've listening to you talk about a book that I read a long time ago, written by a guy who entitled his book, What Would Jesus Do? And he decided to try to live his life before any major decision being made. He would ask himself, what would Jesus do? And I said, I just can't imagine Jesus doing what some of you are suggesting needs to be done. And I got out of there with my skin. But little else. But I deeply believe that about our country. And I fear that there are some who don't understand the uniqueness of the individual rights guaranteed to every American. And I know that you in this society do, and that you will and are fighting to make sure that those rights are protected and defended and preserved. Now, here in Ohio right now, we're facing several serious issues. I'm not going to explain them to you because you know them as well as I, but Senate Bill 5 is a major assault, I believe, upon the working middle class in our state. We are just a few days, 42 days away from voting on that. The polling shows that at this point, most Ohioans express an objection to this draconian anti-worker, anti-labor legislation. But the most recent Quinnipiac poll shows that there is some modest tightening. And the Cincinnati Enquirer today has a headline that says, a majority of Ohioans oppose Issue 2. The Columbus Dispatch had an editorial that said, Issue 2 supporters gaining ground, or something of that effect. But the fact is, this is, I believe, the fight of our lives. Because if we were to lose this fight, it would represent a dismantling of the support system for progressive voices in Ohio. And then there's Issue 3, which is what most people think, an attempt to remove Ohio and Ohioans from the individual mandate contained in the Affordable Care Act, derisively referred to as Obamacare. But Innovation Ohio, a conservative think tank which many of my former staff has started in conjunction with 2 law professors from Case, analyzed Issue 3, and although it's gotten very little attention, because all the oxygen is being directed toward Issue 2. Issue 3 is a terribly sloppily written initiative that would change our Constitution, and it would have little or no effect on the American Affordable Care Act because, as you know, federal law supersedes state law, and what the federal courts ultimately decide about the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act will prevail. But Issue 3 has provisions in it that could seriously inhibit the ability of the state of Ohio to regulate the insurance industry, to protect consumers against incompetent or untrained or other medical providers that could endanger their health and safety. It could interfere with the ability of the state of Ohio to require college students to have health insurance, to be a student at our colleges and universities. It could interfere with our ability to collect data regarding infectious diseases, our ability to license and regulate healthcare providers. And many Ohioans, I would venture to say most Ohioans, have no idea of the potential negative consequences of Issue 3, and we're trying to get that out as much as possible. And then there is the voter suppression efforts in Ohio, and although I don't think it's been officially announced yet, as you know, we had to collect about 331,000 signatures, valid signatures, to get the current law frozen in place until the people could vote in 2012 on these election law issues. And I can tell you that I am very confident. In fact, I know that a sufficient number of signatures have been currently collected to put things on hold. We're continuing to collect signatures, but it looks as if we will be successful in keeping the current election laws in place until the people of Ohio have a chance to vote in 2012. And that's really good news. So there are a lot of challenges. These are the three major issues that I think we are currently facing, but there will be others. I am told that it is likely that if issue 2 were to be sustained, that we would almost certainly then see a petition effort to put a right-to-work initiative on the ballot for 2012. So these are serious times. The issues today are crystal clear. There is no ambiguity. We are, I believe, in Ohio facing the greatest threat to our state and to America's middle class that we have faced in several decades. And that's why this particular time period is so important to all of us. During these next few weeks, these next 42 days, we will determine whether or not Ohio will lead the national effort to turn back the onslaught of the teabaggers, the greedy corporate elites, and the anti-labor zealots. Or will we stand by the wayside and simply watch our families and our communities and our state and our nation give up on our hopes and give in to the agenda of the extreme right wing? Now, what are the differences that so clearly separate the two major political parties today? I believe those differences can be seen in the answer to the following question. Which party is controlled by those who are primarily motivated by rational self-interest, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, the philosophy that has been embraced by Representative Paul Ryan and Governor John Kasich and so many other right-wing governors across the state? A party where greed is celebrated, where a form of social Darwinism has led to the greatest wealth inequity that our country has seen in many generations. That party, my friends, is the modern-day Republican Party. A party that is now led by those who, without shame or embarrassment, say protecting tax cuts for the extremely wealthy is their highest priority. Now, the Democratic is not a perfect organization. We all know that. But I think it is important at this stage in our state's and our nation's history to point out that the Democratic Party historically and still today believes in working for the common good of all. I believe it is important to point out the central values of the Democratic Party. The values of individual opportunity, shared prosperity, and a government that works for all of us. The Democratic Party believes in fairness as an overarching principle. Fairness. And that, my friends, is what we're fighting for. Because the Kasich administration's assault on organized labor and working middle-class folks is just simply unfair. It is disrespectful. It is an attempt to cripple the ability of workers to advocate for fair wages, safe working conditions, and decent benefits. It is a raw political power grab. And consequently, it must be defeated. But not just defeated. I believe it must be pounded into submission. The message must be clearly communicated that Ohio's families are standing together as never before. Nurses, police officers, firefighters, teachers, these individuals and professional groupings who are the salt of the earth, they represent the best that we have. They are the individuals that should be honored for their service. And they now understand the threat. And they are being joined by our brothers and sisters of labor, the community of faith, social justice advocates, and thousands and thousands and thousands of other Ohioans, ordinary citizens. And we must send a message on November the 8th. And if we do, that message will be heard across Ohio and across the nation. We will win, and after we win, we must continue the battle and the fight for fairness. We will work to create a shared prosperity, individual opportunity, and a government that works for all of us. I believe that we are capable of seeing a rebirth of organized labor in Ohio and across America. I believe we are on the verge of seeing a reawakened activism as individuals understand the threat to our individual freedoms. They have awakened us, I believe. They have shook us from our slumber. As the president said, we need to get off the couch and out of our house shoes, and we need to understand that our eyes are now fully opened. They want to fundamentally change Ohio and change America. Can you imagine, my friends, what would happen to the United States Supreme Court if any one of those individuals seeking the Republican nomination for president was in the presidency? It's bad enough as it is. It's terrible as it is. But can you imagine if we had 2 or 3 additional right-wing individuals on the United States Supreme Court? We would see this country change so fundamentally that it would be difficult to recognize it. So here we are. We are in the fight of our lives. But I believe with this challenge comes opportunity. And I really believe that we are starting to see throughout our country a reawakening of the progressive spirit, and that your organization and others, the community of faith, organized labor, and teachers, firefighters, police officers, ordinary citizens are going to stand and say, we will not give up our country to those who want to change it in ways that will make it a country that we can no longer believe in. So thank you for having me today, and thank you for what you do, and God bless you, and God bless America, and let's be strong. Thank you.